Good day. Welcome, everybody. We're super happy that you are joining us on this wonderful Monday. My name is Mitch Ashley. I'm going to serve as your host and moderator of this amazing panel that will be joining me in just a moment. I'll do some introductions. Our topic today is, has DevOps hit a wall? And how do we push through it? Kind of where are we in this adoption of DevOps? And has it run out of gas yet? Or we got a long ways to go? Or kind of how are we doing? So our roundtable today is sponsored by the good folks at Tricentis. Hope you will check out Tricentis and their testing technology. And one of our panelists today is joining us from Tricentis as well. So a little bit of housekeeping here. We are recording the webinar, and everyone who registered for this roundtable, for this webinar, will receive an email with a link to the recording. So if somebody says something interesting or references something, you want to go back and listen to it or share this with a friend, you can certainly do that. Just take notes, but mostly we want you to kind of join in and be part of the conversation. To that point, the platform that we are on, this is a platform called Big Marker, seems to have really nice interactivity in the UI of it. We really like to not just have a discussion with the people on the panel, but in the roundtable. Join us, talk to us in chat. Put your thoughts, put your comment, you put your question in there. You can actually shape and guide the conversation from where we might head to bringing up a topic that maybe we didn't plan to talk about, and we can address it there. So please put something in chat, put something in the Q&A. Either place, we'll try to incorporate that into our conversation. Last but not least, we are giving away gift cards at the end of today's 1-hour program, and we will announce who those winners are. So please stay tuned and find out if you might have a little help paying that credit card bill for the holidays. So let's get to our topic. Has DevOps hit a wall, and how do we push through it? I'm joined by three very esteemed, well-known, and very knowledgeable guests, three good friends, partners, folks that I get to do these kinds of things with often. So let's start with some introductions. Tracy Reagan, would you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about your company too.
Absolutely. Yes, I am the CEO of Deploy Hub. We are a company that's sort of disrupting the DevOps pipeline as usual for the purpose of supporting a microservice architecture and microservice applications. We have a unified microservice catalog that allows you to register the catalog, track it, and understand who's consuming it and where to go if there's a problem.
Excellent. Parag, you want to go next?
Sure. Thank you, Mitch. I am Parag Doshi. I am the VP of Engineering at Tricentis, one of the sponsors for today, and really happy to be here. My role at Tricentis is to run our engineering teams behind our software testing products. Tricentis makes a whole host of software testing products that we say really makes DevOps real and allows you to test custom software, package application software, any different types of testing, whether it's functional testing, API testing, UI testing, mock testing, performance testing, and all flavors around that. So thank you for the opportunity for being here.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks for being here. And thanks for sponsoring too. Lance Knight, introduce yourself.
Hey, thank you so much. And I appreciate being here as your court jester. No, actually, I'm Lance Knight. I am the president and COO of ConnectAll. We're a value stream management company specializing in capturing, seeing, measuring, and automating your software delivery value stream. All the way from ideas to code in production, we let you automate all of that and see it and measure it all together. So
it's really interesting between the three of you, the parts of the DevOps pipeline that we cover between the technologies that your companies work on. Now, you might notice if when you signed up for this webinar, for this roundtable, a couple of other people were supposed to be joining us today. Unfortunately, Alan Shimo, who is CEO of Textron Group, got an emergency notice from Santa. He needed some help in the workshop. So Alan's headed up from Boca to the North Pole to give him a hand. And I don't know why, but he enlisted John Willis to go up there with him. So they're probably up there already working on some good toys for good boys and girls all across the world. So unfortunately, they won't be joining us today, but I'm sure they'll be back on a future roundtable coming up soon. So let's talk about our topic today. Maybe we can start out with just talking about where we are in this life cycle of DevOps. I don't know about you all. I'm often asked, so are we done with DevOps? Is there something else? What's going to replace it? Or we still have some ways to go? Where are we in kind of this adoption life cycle of DevOps? And Lance, since I had you introduce yourself last, why don't you go first this time?
Great. You know, I pondered that question before we came to this webinar, and a couple of things came to me. First is, do we have DevOps really well defined enough? And then the other thing that came to me is, I don't think it's hit a wall. I think it's maturing and transforming as anything does. And I think my point of view is making the teams work together in a culture perspective that DevOps puts across, besides the tooling, of course. I think that's an ongoing thing that's still there, right? I mean, I come from a legacy of operations and manufacturing. I don't think that's all been cured yet. I don't think that true sense of, fostering culture between operations and development has totally taken root. I think we've got a ways to go for that one. And then what is it going to transform into as well, right? Where's DevOps going to go? And the bigger question is really, I don't know if we've answered this, but what is DevOps? Is it a tool? Is it a culture shift? Everybody I talk to says something different. I usually go to the culture piece of it. A lot of other people I know go to the tooling piece of it, So until we really get to that answer, how do we know if it's hit a wall?
Interesting. Yeah, there is no manifesto like Agile.
Right.
Right. And it's certainly that I think the definition has evolved and changed and been adopted. Tracy, you've worked in this environment for a while, been around DevOps. First, where would you say we are in this sort of life cycle of DevOps?
Well, maybe to understand where we are, we look at where we've been. I'll age myself here a bit, but can anybody name the first DevOps tool?
The one I know of is Jenkins, but I don't know if that's the first DevOps. That's the first one I used.
It's Endeavor.
Endeavor, okay.
Which is a mainframe version control engine that had everything built into it. You could, check in. There was quorum for approvals. You could do ship functions. And you know what Endeavor stands for? Environment for Developers and Operations.
Oh my gosh.
That's why it's spelled wrong, in case anybody ever thought C8 didn't know how to spell Endeavor. It's spelled wrong because it's ENV and the DEVOR for operations instead of OPS like we say it today. We have always done DevOps. We will always do DevOps. We call it DevOps today. Yesterday, we called it lifecycle management, software configuration management. It has gone through so many iterations of names because we geeks love our acronyms and we love to name things and we get excited about it. It's the shiny new object, but we've always done it and we always will. You can't create a software assembly line without the practice. And to Lance's point, I consider it a practice, and the practice has tooling around it. But you can't create that software assembly line without a DevOps practice. So we always hit a wall in DevOps. Every time we change our technology, we went from monolithic, now we're going to cloud native and microservices. DevOps has to adjust to. So we feel like we've hit a wall because we're at a point in our DevOps pattern that we have to start changing it. And that can be scary because we have a lot of scripted workflows to deal with. So it feels like we've hit a wall, but we're just turning a corner.
Really good way to look at it. How about you, Parag? Oops, we're not getting, you're on mute there.
My apologies there. So following up with what Tracy just said, I really liked, it was educational for me to hear about Endeavor, right? And that gets me to think about whenever we invent some new term or new capability, it's always the fundamental first principles that we get back to. So I go back as far as even as a child when I learned how to program, and just that insatiable desire that right when we make a change to our technology, in this case, we're thinking of software code, I expect to immediately see it on the screen, okay, or see it on any interface. I want to see my work manifested in reality within seconds. Well, fast forward that a couple decades, in my case, maybe 3, but we're talking about complex systems with many moving parts, lots of things changing, 1,000 people's hands, and perhaps a software as a service. And why should our expectations change from that? There's really no reason. We expect that immediate gratification to make a change and to be able to see that immediately and immediately react if it's not operating the way we want. Now, what we've done is over the years, we've said, okay, let's invite and create names like CI. Okay, we're going to continuously integrate, then continuously deploy. So we keep correcting the parts of that vision that we feel like we're falling short. Now I think about so we thought about DevOps, right? So DevOps, we said, well, the operators aren't necessarily working collaboratively with developers. So we said that's a cultural thing there. Now we're talking even things like GitOps, right? And GitOps, I think, is trying to say, hey, let's also worry. Our emphasis is not just on development and testing, but also on operations and that full life cycle. But I think it's back to the same vision that we should never forget as a young programmer or as a young child, having that insatiable demand to see any bit of work that I do be manifested in reality within seconds.
Well, one way to define hitting a wall, and by the way, I can't, Pauken, I don't know his name, put a comment in the chat if everybody wants to check it out. DevOps met a wall, but there were many doors. But as a person, once you enter one, you cannot use the other doors. That may be a little hard for me to fully get in my head. But I think to your point, Prog, is it's not a fixed thing. So the fact that it isn't well defined is actually kind of an advantage because it can evolve as we evolve. As cloud native becomes more and more part of what we're doing. And of course, Tracy, that's your world very much. How we develop software or deploy software in that environment is wrapped into what DevOps is too. In some ways, they can be separated, but they're not necessarily.
I think to what was said in the chat is we're not making it easy, right? As IT professionals, it's so hard because there's thousands of choices, in terms of the tooling that's required, and then the target that we're testing or the target that we're trying to deploy to an environment perspective is so variable. We have a heterogeneous environment. I think sometimes that plethora of choice actually makes it hard. So you might go down one path, one process, one technology platform, and then you find out, well, okay, in reality, to achieve my business use case, I have to accommodate so many different target systems under test and target so many different environments, and not all environments are the same. So we're just struggling from the inertia of making that vision a reality.
And those are data points, right? When I look at what we're doing now in DevOps, we are terrible at tracking data. And in reality, what we're moving to a component-driven development practice, which means there could be anything's a component. A microservice is a component, an API is a component, an infrastructure change is a component, a key value pair is a component. An environment endpoint is a component. And all those components together make up a package. Now, what we've always done is we have never collected the data into one place so that it can be flexible and it can be seen and it can be acted upon, which is, that's where I'm putting my money. That's what Deploy Hub does, is we want to hoard data. Because it's just parts are just parts, and you might have a database update that goes to a particular endpoint and has a particular deployment logic that's different from the microservice you're about to deploy. But they're all still part of the same application. They're all still part of the package. And what we've done in the past has been very imperative in our work. We write a script, and that script is very specific for that one component. And then we put all the components in the script, and then we try to use tools that say, this tool is good for Visual Studio. This tool is good for deploying a monolithic to physical servers. This tool is good for updating, a cluster. But we've never really consolidated. And that was kind of the point of continuous delivery. But all of our continuous delivery workflows are very imperative. So now we need to shift to more of a declarative approach. And in order to do that, you have to separate the data from the definition. So I'm betting on the need for exactly what you just described. That is the problem. And the way we solve that is to stop trying to connect the data together with the definition of all these imperative scripts, and instead pull it all apart, because now we are in a component-driven world. And one way to track that is to centralize all the information. We've done it with the service catalog forever, with bigger application level pieces, right? We have to think of that in terms of now every application running across the life cycle with a lot of different moving parts, different incremental changes, regardless if it's at the infrastructure layer, or if it's at the data layer, or if it's at the application layer. And that is the wall we've hit right now, because we haven't done a good job of creating that centralized data. So we have no way to turn the data into intelligence. And now we have this whole world of AI and ML, and the DevOps community is sorely behind being able to take our data. And there's a ton of data that's pushed across the pipeline. Data that is actionable. This particular component, every time we push it out, it breaks something. Maybe we should slow it down. Maybe we should have a quorum. Maybe we should do some more testing on it. We don't have that kind of data. And that is where I believe this particular industry needs to stand up, turn around, sit back down, and get rid of the imperative scripts and start thinking declarative. And that is what GitOps is. That's what IAC is. That's it. They have started us down that path. But now it's a matter of having the data to create and generate those declarative processes, and have operators out there that know what to do with it.
So, wow, that's really insightful. But I'm going to come back to this point of view I started with. You made a statement that that's what DevOps is. I can find other people make a different statement. And until we have one common understanding of what it is, we're going to sit here in this point of what it is. Is DevOps CI/CD? Is DevOps the testing stuff? Is DevOps going to become value stream management? You got to get to a point where we have some kind of consensus on, is DevOps tooling, right? Yeah, DevOps, I think you're absolutely right. What you said, Tracy, it's about getting that data, getting information, making good decisions on it. But is it also the culture thing? Is it also this other thing? Is it being able to test and see my stuff real time and code? Say, by the way, I started on a Commodore VIC-20, so I don't think that may put me out there all the way out. I'm not sure, but Commodore PET, if you guys remember those, so that ages me out there too. Right?
The Commodores.
I love my Commodores.
Love it.
Best DevOps tool ever made? Maybe not. But the point I'm getting at is we don't have a consensus of what it is, right? And without a consensus, how do we ever take it to a point to where we're going to say this? And the other thing Tracy said earlier is absolutely right too. It has been around forever, right? ConnectAll focuses on value stream management. I started learning that in the 80s when I started working in manufacturing, and using lean and development principles to improve software, to improve manufacturing at the time. So, I propose that question back still of, is it a set of tools? Is it a method of the way you work together? What is it? I just don't have that clear thing to say this is DevOps really.
Can anybody help out, Lance?
I think, there's culture, sponsorship, all those sort of softer aspects. How do you get people to collaborate? That seems to be solution of all the problems, right? But one thing that I've seen people, when they actually render DevOps to provide value in terms of software, delivering software as opposed to, let's say, vehicles. But there's a good analogy there with manufacturing processes. Then we're thinking of that continuous integration and continuous deployment. I think that much I've not heard yet of anybody saying, well, DevOps, I don't really have to do continuous integration and delivery or continuous deployment.
Right.
Back to Mitch's question about, where are we on this journey? I'd say a lot of people feel like they are doing continuous integration, continuous delivery, and then continuous deployment all the way to production, maybe not so many. Even something as simple as continuous integration, you can argue, are you really doing that? What does continuous mean? That means instantaneous. And if you're not doing that at least once a day, then you're really not doing continuous integration. Then you're probably not even going to continuous delivery. And continuous delivery, I mean, imagine if we said, whether it's Jenkins or Endeavor, Tracy, that just click on this thing and, I own this whole SaaS system that's generating $1 billion of revenue for my company. I'm going to walk out of the room and I'm going to say, Mitch, just press that button when you feel like deploying this out. I'd probably scream and say, don't do that, right? So then you don't have continuous deployment. And so I'd say we're still early because of the friction of and the heterogeneity that I talked about earlier to really make this a reality. To me, to have that vision become a reality, we need to have trust of CI and CD. And that trust, one of the key Achilles heel is, to me, it's testing and visibility of, back to the data thing, Tracy, that you talked about. I see data being declarative, especially in the Kubernetes ecosystem, Kubernetes cloud native sort of ecosystem with YAML files and things being simplified with Helm to package it all together and make things a whole lot simpler. But then there's a lot of the world, unfortunately, that doesn't adhere to that spec. And so we've got that data to declare what we want to deploy, but then we don't have enough data. And I'd say here at Tricentis, we're trying to make a change and improve in this area to even give you trust to release on demand. Do we even have dashboards that say, for every system under test, say I have thousands of them in a large enterprise, can I truly have confidence to release this thing on demand? A developer can make that decision and deploy that immediately. I think we have pockets of excellence that are doing these kinds of things, several companies, the unicorns that are out there, but we are very early in the maturity of DevOps. So I think we are so far from that wall. There's too much to do. I almost find this question ludicrous. Have we hit a wall? I'm like, that vision as a child is still not here.
Well, let me get a shot at defining DevOps. I started with Endeavor, Environment for Development and Operations. When you think about how we got here and why we're even having this conversation, it is a life cycle practice. It's the software assembly line. And the software assembly line looks different for every industry. Some industries are never going to do continuous delivery. Microservices, we won't do continuous integration anymore. You don't compile something and have to see if your build broke. You're going to create a microservice and you're going to push it into a container. You're going to do a container build, but that doesn't require doing any kind of continuous integration. So it's not any of those things. And the reason why we started calling it DevOps in the first place was because in our lifecycle management, what we had was this wall. We had a wall mostly between testing and production, but we often had a wall between development, testing, and production. And you didn't have somebody who was a trusted partner on the application team to work with testing teams and production teams to get the software moved into those environments. So we started a kind of a movement, a cultural movement in the beginning that meant we need to have a better discussion between dev and operations. We came up with titles like Site Reliability Engineer, who became that trusted partner working on an application team. They oftentimes have access to testing and production environments to make sure that the software is stable and has been deployed correctly. because operations, they don't know anything about your software. And so it always was the case in our standard lifecycle management practice. I did this role where somebody on the application team was the person that the production team called when something went wrong. And so you got access to production. So in essence, I was a default SRE, even though I was a developer who happened to know how to build scripts fit together. So we've evolved, and DevOps, I think, really is more of a cultural shift in the way we break down the silos between dev, test, and prod. But in that discussion, we have created a lot of different tooling for automation, and the software assembly line is a direct reflection of the work that we've done in breaking down the silos. Because once the silos are broken down, we can start automating that pipeline, what we call the DevOps pipeline now, instead of the lifecycle pipeline or our Jenkins workflow. We can start automating that. And when we start automating it, we can go a lot faster. Now, when we start changing over to our cloud native environments, we're going to really have some challenges. A microservice could impact multiple testing teams. How do we start managing those kinds of dependencies? And so we are going to evolve again, but we are never going to stop evolving, because software is never going to stop evolving. If we had thought about it 5 years ago, even 5 years ago, and people are doing Docker and Swarm is out there, but if anybody had told me that Kubernetes would be as popular as it is today, I would have said no way. I would say absolutely no way. Nobody's going to shift that fast to that kind of environment. But because it's fault tolerant, and because it auto scales, and because now we have more and more software that we're trying to deliver, it is the platform of choice, and we have to get there. DevOps, we're going to have to adapt to those new changes, and we're going to have to figure it out pretty fast, because it's going to be a mess if we don't, and that's our job. So we have some work to do, and I do feel like when I talk to SREs, they're pretty stressed out, even though they have these pipelines. They know the pipelines aren't serving them anymore. And that is where we're at in the process. We are literally going through another wave of transformation, and I think it's kind of fun. It creates a lot of interesting things to do.
It's interesting. It's not a definition, but one of the things I say about DevOps is it's about not what we're doing, it's about how we're doing it. And I think, to me, the most fundamental thing about DevOps is it's turned the focus back onto rethinking, in some ways in a big way. Tracy, you talk about, okay, it isn't to build anymore. I would have thought containers, would have been the end. That was the thing, right? That was the one ring to rule them all for software. But we continually rethink this. And I think part of Tim put a message out on the chat too, talking about it depends on your environment, right? People are in different places, and I have to keep reminding myself, one team has been doing a certain way maybe for a long time, and DevOps might be the reason that's kind of sparking, well, maybe we should think about a few things differently. And you've got sort of unicorn greenfield on the other end, who are just going to start out with whatever the current way is doing it. So Tracy, to your point about thinking of software in a declarative environment, it's not fixed anymore. It's not okay, we're here and it's going to stay that way for 3 years. No, it's going to stay that way for 3 seconds till the next thing comes along and changes it. And that's kind of the world that we're in, and you can't do it the old way in that environment. Anybody agree, disagree?
Well, and the thing is, every Tim is correct. Every industry has different requirements. Banking is different from telecom, which is different from gaming, which is different from edge. I mean, imagine being a medical company. You're not going to do a continuous deployment every day out to all that equipment that you have sitting at doctors' offices around the country. So while they still have their own version of DevOps, their best practices are very different from that of a highly regulated financial industry who wants to push things out quickly but has to do it tightly, or a gaming industry that the software developer says, this is really cool, I'm just going to push it out today. So everybody has their own best practice, and it's based on industry. So Tim, you're absolutely right. There's a huge spectrum of DevOps.
There's also a huge regulation spectrum as well, based on what we talked about. And it's interesting, right? You said earlier today about it being the software manufacturing or assembly line or those types of things. And I think that's where the transformation you talked about is about to go down or happening or in the midst of it, right? That's where this whole value stream management movement comes in a little bit. Now, I know we're a value stream management company, but that's a lot of what's going on. And so I spend a lot of time in my thought leadership trying to protect us from jumping into that full value stream managing like we do in manufacturing mindset of software delivery, because you really can. It's a little bit different, although you can automate it, do those types of things. But it's really interesting as it starts to change. As you know, I mean, I thought AWS was cloud native, right? So, I mean, I think that's kind of where it started with the SaaS stuff, right? So, and where did we get the name? I mean, I'm totally aging myself. Where did we get the name cloud? Well, somebody drew a cloud and said that's the internet. Now, some marketing people, that marketing guy that did that, you know, he must be close to Al Gore. I don't know. There's another old joke for you. So it's really interesting as it's morphing and changing. And I'm seeing operations really take over that part of figuring out how to be more effective in moving code through the production process. It's a very interesting thing as it's evolving.
And every kind of silo in the DevOps community, whether it be value stream or testing or deployments or builds, we are all being disrupted as we speak with the move away from monolithic, because we built all these tools years ago around a monolithic architecture. So we think still in a monolithic way. And I look every day, I watch, the market as closely as possible, that for new tools that are really going to step in and start tracking value stream for microservices. There's going to be a new requirement. We're going to be talking about supply chain. Supply chain's a new kind of term that we've come up with. But now, why would that be? We have to think about. Everybody's talking about supply chain because of physical products being moved around. But we have to realize that now, when we are looking at a cloud native application, or one built on microservices, I talked earlier about all the parts, the different parts. All those parts are raw data. Those are raw products. That's the raw goods that goes in. Eventually, it goes into our applications, our microservice applications. So we have to start tracking now the supply chain, the raw goods that go into our applications. Most enterprises are really looking at ways to reduce the amount of coding that they're doing. A truly cloud native environment where you're building it on a microservice or a service or a microservice architecture is a shared one. So not everybody writes a login routine. One team is responsible for a bounded context around security, and they have functions that support the login routine. Now, every application team is going to consume that login routine, and that makes up their application. The login routine now is raw goods going into the application. So now we're going to think about tracking raw goods and supply chain and tracking their value stream. How do you test those? How do you deploy those? How do you track? Do we have a poly repository where every microservice has every small bounded context function has its own repository and its own workflow? We are being disrupted, and it's time. We've been trying to do incremental agile practices for I don't know how long. It's been way long, and we still always do. We do an incremental check-in, and we do an incremental build in our CI practice, but we always do a monolithic deployment every single time. Everything goes out all big. And testing has to deal with that. So we're changing, and it's all for the good, but it is a disruption.
It's a point of disruption. One of the things DevOps has done, I think, is actually, as some of the silos have broken down, it's also elevated other jobs. You're talking about SRAs being under a lot of stress, Tracy. But we actually know that now, whereas maybe 3 years ago, we've been like, yeah, I don't know, ops is dealing with that. I don't know what they do, right? And it's come to include security and now data and then ops and even regulatory folks around compliance. It's really, I don't want to say it's nirvana and everybody's working together and it's all, kumbaya, if you will. but it has, I think, elevated the importance of different parts of that DevOps tool chain workflow process of why those functions are important and how do they get better connected into the software creation and delivery process. Then that seems to be, we're kind of disrupting ourselves by helping other people be part of what they need to do in delivering software.
I was thinking about the word silo. And, I think I've spent the last, I'm trying to think about how long we've talked about how do we remove these silos? How do we break these silos down? I remember I worked at a company in 2000 about breaking down the silos between operations and development. We're about breaking down the silos between test and automation. And it seems like it's been almost this lifelong thing that I've heard. I did work on a farm. They had a silo in the 80s, so maybe that counts a little. But it's interesting as we continue to talk about breaking these silos down, but I haven't yet seen that we've been able to do it in these years, right? I think we've made some great progress in helping people connect these silos, right? And VSM could be a piece of that. However, it's just interesting as it's always this theme of breaking down the silos, helping people communicate better, and so on. I'm trying to formulate better thought leadership on it, and how to articulate my mindset on the silo thing. And it's really interesting as it keeps coming around in my tenure of doing software stuff.
They're always there. Those walls are always there somehow, right?
It's true. And some of them actually, we talk about breaking them down, but I think some need to be there. You definitely don't want a developer just sending code off to production, right? It should be.
Well, that's my argument. That depends.
Okay.
That depends. Okay, let's say it is a microservice that changes the color of a bar.
Mm-hmm.
Let it rip. Let it get out there.
I would agree
But if
with
it's
you
a
there.
microservice that's the login routine that's going to impact, 20 other applications, maybe that workflow should have more constraints around it. Not every deployment, not every update is the same. And this is what I'm talking about, being able to have more intelligence around our pipeline in terms of what we're doing. I mean, I served as a tester for years, and it would frustrate me when some of the stuff would come through, when I could see, because I had been in development, so I could see what the change was, but somehow we had to still go through the same workflow process as the most difficult and the most high risk change, but not every change is the same. So we need to have more intelligence in our pipelines. We need to have less silos, and we probably need to have fewer humans making the decision, because with the proper ML, we can start defining risk values of these updates. And in an imperative workflow process, we could automatically push one change that goes through, if it goes through dev to prod, because the application team is the one responsible for doing the testing of that. But other changes has to go through a full testing suite. So we have to just start seeing it differently, because
it's really one size doesn't fit all, right, Tracy?
One size does not fit all.
Right.
And not every change is the same. So that's where I want to get to. That's what I want to see, how this industry can really become truly automated and use intelligence to make these decisions.
I think it gets back to having those different pipelines where you can say what is the right pipeline for those different scenarios, right? Like you said, if there's the business can value mean time to repair if we were to make a mistake just by changing the color of an icon or of the background, versus changing a logging framework that could introduce a really terrible class in the class loader, like's happening in the world right now in Java, right?
I was waiting for that to come up.
Yeah. I mean, Tracy sort of reminded me of the day job that I have here for some of our Java applications, right?
Yeah.
So really, the one size fits all is far from the truth. We need to have those software supply chains that are dialable for different purposes. And with automation now, right, we can do more and more than we've ever thought of, right? So what would be considered a regression test, we said, oh, that's going to be done at the end-to-end test, because the code's got to get all the way to a pre-prod environment for me to do all the different kinds of tests. Well, now we could do chaos testing, performance testing in a shared integrated development environment at times too, if the environment supports that, right? So as our maturity evolves, as our automation evolves, then our expectations evolves, and I keep coming back to trust, right? It's how much do I trust that I can let this code go to what extent? All the way out to production? No, just pre-prod. No, just to QA. No, just to the shared development environment. It's different for each circumstance. And back to Tim's point, right? From the chat, there are different teams that are going to be different, right? This whole monolith versus microservices thing. If you ask me, we're going to do a startup and we're going to build a brand new product, I'm going to start with a monolith. Why? Because as a human inventing that new thing that's never been done before, I don't know how to do the bounded context, right? So I'm going to start off monolith and then break it down. And back to Lance's point, breaking down silos too. We have to keep more of a monolith so that everybody is forced to collaborate. And then as we break up services, then we're trying to say, okay, these are independent deployable units, so that obstacle of humans collaborating with one another becomes less and less important across each service. Each service team can run their own supply chain, deploy on their own. There are API interfaces that govern what goes in and out of that service and what value that service provides. But just the maturity across different teams is different in that stage of, am I doing something brand new, which may start off as a monolith, but then get continuously refactored into a more of a microservice, or at least segmented, independently deployable architectural pattern.
So there's some new interesting projects at the CD Foundation. There's an event special interest group, and they are probably going to be morphing that into a proper project soon. And it will help solve some of these problems in terms of, we're talking about silos. The event, so part of the problem that we all know, and we all love Jenkins, but we all ran into, it hit a wall when it came to plugins. There was constant, and there still constantly is problems when it comes to a plugin has to get updated, then you update your software and the plugin doesn't work anymore. So they're building what is called an event listener. That will be almost like a control plane that sits above the CD pipeline itself, whether it be CI, a Circle CI, or a Jenkins, whatever that the orchestration engine might be. The listener then handles the kicking off of what we used to call a plugin and passes the payload back. Think about cloud events, and then you get an idea of what CD events might look like. Now, if they accomplish this goal and can really build out a strong event listener, then creating these more dynamic workflows can be based on policies. Right, so you define your policies based on maybe a risk level of a particular object, and then you can automatically really create the policy to say, this is what I need, and the event listener already understands the policy and can say, these are the steps it has to go through. That would be very cool. Right? I'm rooting for that team, because having CD events will change the way we think about how we can build out our pipelines. Security, for example, I talk to companies often about security. They want to add security into their workflows, but if they do that, they have to go and they have to visit literally hundreds of imperative workflow scripts to add the security to it. Now, if you had an event listener, you wouldn't have to do that. You would just have to change you could change your policy to say this step of security is automatically executed, no matter who's executing the workflow. The who is no longer important. It's just the what that the event listener is pushing, and then the who is filled in later. And this helps break down silos because we're talking about trust, right? We have silos because we have a trust issue. We have a trust issue because we don't have enough data to make a decision or feel confident in pushing something forward. That's right. So all of these things, I believe, all these new kinds of these shifts in what we're calling continuous delivery will help the DevOps pipeline, will help the DevOps community break down the silos, will help build the trust. So we're just evolving again.
Tracy,
it's a good time.
I'd add what you said about the policy. I'm really looking forward to that project from CNCF, policy-driven continuous delivery, it sounds like, or GitOps.
Well, this one's through the CD Foundation, but the policy is from CNCF, and they'll probably use the open policy architecture that the CNCF is building. Yeah.
Have you also, like, if I can go a step further, and in my former life, I helped healthcare companies go to cloud. And we actually had to challenge the policies themselves. So going even a step back, I mean, sometimes policies would be, if in cloud, then add a lot more humans to evaluate every step of the way, right? So and it was just defined as, if you're going in cloud, then you've got to add more bureaucracy, which was the whole point of going to cloud, automation, DevOps, and things. So then we had to really question the policies, and people forgot, why were those policies even there? And it was more because of the lack of knowledge, right? It's something that we don't quite understand out there. So the deny first attitude sometimes, actually hurts progress, and you don't get to take advantage of a lot of the security capabilities that are within cloud. So we actually, I spent years at Anthem. We had like tens of thousands of applications, and now they've got over hundreds that go into cloud. But we had to first break down those barriers of even defining the policies and having the security team part of DevOps, and then we coined the term DevSecOps. The industry did, we didn't. Which is, again, back to Lance's point. Let's just get everybody collaborate, development, operations. Oh, what about security? Next will come network.
Right? Well, let's do this. We're coming up the kind of last fourth quarter of if you will, of our time together. So I do want to announce who our gift card winners, and then we'll kind of finish on something. I want you to think about, what is your New Year's resolution for DevOps in 2022? What do we hope for DevOps? Is the thing you're going to start doing or not doing for DevOps? I do want to announce our gift card winners. Our 4 winners are Arbnor H, Matt T, Vanessa W, and Alicia C. The good folks at TechStrong Learning, TechStrong will get a hold of you and let you know how to get a hold of those good gift cards. So congratulations on our winner. So let's start out with the New Year's resolution. We're not at Christmas yet, but we'll almost there. And New Year's will be right behind it, of course. Parag, do you want to start us out?
Sure. Now I've got to pick which of these great ideas I have, but let me first follow up with what Tracy brought up, the struggle, and I'm glad Tracy brought this up about the data, right? We can't establish the trust because we don't have the data. So one of my resolutions will be, I want to give data of testing results, no matter what kind of test, no matter what kind of system under test, and bring that to the fingertips of people. I don't believe that by 2022, we can say everything's fully automated, meaning the data comes in your face through an API, you get a testing software quality score, and then that self-heals the system back. That might be a little too ambitious, but at least let's get it visible and actionable. And then maybe in 2023 onwards, we'll get the full closed loop, just to set some expectations. So data would be one, but I have to add a second one, because especially what Tracy works on with Cloud Native Foundation, one of the beauties of cloud native is it's really reducing the heterogeneity of at least how a lot of the new things are being developed. So now we have, what kinds of Kubernetes objects exist? What are the YAMLs for those? Those are becoming standardized. The standards are getting better and better. So, the second New Year's resolution that I would like to provide is a purpose-built cloud-native testing tool or a test bot.
Now you scared me for a minute. I started to think you might be in product because you were trying to slip in an extra feature and you got it in.
I got it in, yes. but I'm an engineer, so I've got to deliver now too.
Yeah, now you got to do it. Well, you get to work on what you want to work on. Lance, go for it.
I think from a DevOps perspective, I think I'm going to continue the double mission of the human side of it. At Connect always say value stream management's human. The humans do that. They decide what tools to deploy. They decide how to improve, how to remove waste, how to make the assembly line work better, and providing that information to the DevOps engineers. At the same time, I think, from a 2022 perspective, we're going to continue that mission of helping to automate more, right? So one of the things I've become aware of lately, and really like metrics, you can get those from ConnectAll, a part of our VSM solution. We can get the data from any solution out there and put it into a common data model and give you those metrics, is to continue that point of view that it's also about the automation as well. Once I have information, now what do I do with it, right? Value stream management is about flow metrics, all the metrics, any of those metrics you want from any solution out there, we can connect them and give it to you. Once you have that information, how do I know what to do with it, right? Once I have a new tool, how do I know how I can make that really effective? So I'm going to continue that kind of thought leadership in DevOps about the human side of it, even though our solution itself helps automate a lot of that. How do I manage my software delivery, CI/CD, my testing practices, my value stream at ConnectAll, and as a thought leader, more of that human side of stuff?
I'll make sure my product connects with yours, Lance.
It does already.
How's that? There you go.
Nice. Okay, Tracy, why don't you bring it home?
Well, here at Deploy Hub, we will continue bringing forward these concepts of centralizing data around components and a component-driven architecture like microservice, serverless, Salesforce, Apex, and push that as well through our open source community. We do have an open source side of Deploy Hubs called Ortelius. Ortelius is one. There's two I would call them catalog or microservice registries that's incubating in the Linux Foundation. One's in the CNCF called Backstage, and then Ortelius is incubating at the Continuous Delivery Foundation. So we're going to continue pushing that model because we really do believe that there is, once you put that data together, have all that data in one place, that we can then start creating more automation, creating more trust, start managing risk levels, and doing all the fun stuff that people who are doing AI and ML get to do. And we'll do it around the CD pipeline.
Excellent. Well, my New Year's resolution is to double the number of conversations, bringing together good folks like you three on these kinds of events and live events and things like that. So to me, one of the most enjoyable things about the work I get to do is to collaborate and talk with people like yourselves that are innovating, creating very cool and valuable, useful technologies that ultimately get proven out in the marketplace, right? And so I think people are also looking for sharing knowledge and experience and learning from others and doing that in a fast and efficient way. And what better way than to get experts together and talk together? And I learn every time we get together. So Tracy Reagan, CEO with Deploy Hub, we really appreciate you being with us today. Always I love hearing the latest about the declarative future that we're creating. Lance Lance Knight, who is president and COO with ConnectAll. Thank you for joining us. And special thanks to our friends at Tricentis and Parag Dosi, who is joining us today. Thank you, Parag. Thanks to all of you for joining us. We appreciate it. And just a reminder, everybody, we will be sending out an email with a link to the recording. And I want to end just thanking our audience for their great participation. Tim, Mike, Paul, all kinds of folks that jumped in on the chat and helped us move this conversation along. So we hope that you have a great holiday, and we'll hope to see you back soon on the next event. Take care.
Thank you.
All.